Go. So stand by, everybody. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, my name is Adrian Dunn, and I'm the advisor for racial equity and minority student success here at CCPA. And I'm really excited for today's conversation on our community here at CCPA, our AAPI community. And I would like to start just by introducing all of our panelists today. MingHuan, can you start?
Yes, my name is MingHuan. I'm a violinist and artist faculty member, and I'm also head of strings at CCPA.
Awesome.
My name is Winston Choi, and I am associate professor of piano and the head of piano here at CCPA.
And also married to MingHuan.
That's why we're not social distancing.
Context is important. My name is Yeeseon Kwon. I'm associate professor of piano pedagogy and piano musicianship at CCPA, and I teach both of those subjects.
I'm Linda Berna, and I am the director of the Music Conservatory.
And my name is Ray Frewen. I am the director of the Theater Conservatory.
Wonderful. Now that we're all here and introduced, I wanted to ask our first question here to our professors. Would you be willing to share any experiences of racial or cultural struggle in the US, specifically in your artistry or your career? How does this guide you to consider your minority students and even more so your international students here at CCPA?
Sure.
Well, I think for me personally, there's also one more layer on top of race is also gender as well. So as Asian female, there's always a stereotype. We are usually perceived as being quiet and obedient, and we're not taught to speak our mind. So I think that we're perceived that way as well. And many of my international students come from different countries, so they may not be completely comfortable with language. And I think it's just kind of breaking that barrier, and as an Asian female, and as I just mentioned, it's either we're very quiet or, I'm a mother of twins, and so we're also known to be tiger moms, right? So it's that two extremes, right? So, but I don't think I'm either. I think I'm somewhere falling right in the middle, and I think that I feel privileged that I am being in my position, being the head of strings, and in some ways that I hope that I can inspire my Asian students, and especially my Asian female students, that there are positions out there for leadership, and it's possible. It sometimes can be a struggle, but it's definitely possible. I'm still learning in my position right now, and learning to keep speaking up and get my voices heard. But I do have a very good environment here, and where I get to talk to people, and sometimes I have to show vulnerability. I think that's important for faculty members to be able to talk to the students, heart to heart. So we're not just this figure that, if they feel that we're humans too, we have our own struggles as well, then they can relate to us more. So, what do you think, Winston?
Yeah, I think I've been in a position where, first of all, when people meet me and they hear my name, Winston Choi, there's the automatic assumption that I'm American born. In my case, I'm Canadian born, compared to your name, for instance, where people really struggle to pronounce it. So I feel like I already feel I've witnessed the discrepancy, that how people treat me and treat you just because of the pronounceability of our name, right? And so there's the immediate accessibility of a name like Winston, for instance, and a lot of we make the assumption that if people keep their Korean name, their Chinese name, or Yeeseon can probably speak to that much more. That whether they've kind of taken a more so-called white name or not. I have a very white name, or it's an unusual name, and in some ways that's kind of breaking down certain barriers much more than my parents. My father and mother kept their Chinese names, even though they've been in Canada for almost 50 years.
I think that's a very good point, because I do feel that Winston, seems like, when we introduce ourselves to other people, it's like, oh, my name is Winston, and then immediately, oh, nice to meet you, but my name is MingHuan. There's always like, it's like a little bit of, uncomfortable, like maybe for them to pronounce my name, which, it's okay. That's the thing, it's like, I have more people asking me now, how do I pronounce your name? And so I never mind that question. It's more of when I feel that they're uncomfortable and they don't really want to or care to learn, and then I'll just, well, fine, just call me Michelle, so, but these days I feel that I do that less and less. I'm feeling more comfortable to say my name is MingHuan, and this is how you pronounce my name. So, yeah.
I think I just wanted to continue on that conversation, and I think like MingHuan said about the layers of not just being an Asian American or being Asian, the female part or the gender part is also a big part of our experience, whether we're coming from an international background, or for my case, an American background or a Canadian background. So I think, those are layers, and our experiences are certainly not monolithic. Even my name, Yeeseon, I'm Asian American, but I'm a daughter of an immigrant, right? I have an immigrant experience in America. So I have a Korean name, and I don't have any other name. I don't even have a middle name. And so growing up, being asked since kindergarten, well, what else can we call you? And I don't. And, I've had instructors who would make names for me, only say part of my name, like call me Yi. And, when you're in third grade and you say, that's not my name, it's Yeeseon. It's Yeeseon, actually. Oh, like Nissan, the car? No, not like the car. So I think people want to make that connection and be familiar, but it's along the lines of what's comfortable for them. And I think that sort of speaks to the adaptability, how females, I think in general, just we try to mold ourselves and be adaptable to people's expectations. I think there's that dynamic, but then also I think there is the perception that, Asian Americans in general are more conforming. Those are the sort of the prejudices and the stereotypes. They're more conforming. Like you said, either MingHuan, we're either this too, we mold, or then you're too outspoken, and none of us are any of those things. We're all of those things. So I think it's important to kind of know that if you've experienced some of these things, you kind of understand the struggles. I see that in my students. Here we are, all those many years later, and I'm turning into an old lady, and I see the younger, Asian Americans or Asian second, third generations, or even international students, and facing the same type of struggle in America, in our universities and conservatories. And that's where I'm very challenged. And I kind of think that's, sharing our stories, being vulnerable with some of those things. I think it's important to know that they're seen and they're heard. And perhaps I too went through some of that experience. I went through the struggle of wanting to be a Michelle MingHuan, obviously, because no one could pronounce my name. And I didn't think it was even that hard. It's like two vowels. It's an E and a son. I even came up with a rhyme. I came up with a little phrase, and then they were like, oh, that helps. And then I don't know when it was, maybe when I was going into college, when I was going into Northwestern, I had an opportunity to, I have a lot of students who come into college their freshman year, and I always ask them, do you have a name? Like if they're William, do you want to be Bill, or if they go by their middle name? And I always ask very first day, and sometimes they have a different name altogether. And I had that same opportunity. And I decided, nope, if you want to know me, you got to say my name. And it just, there was a light bulb that goes on. And so I think who we are and what we are and the perceptions that people perceive us. So if you're quiet, that is construed one way. It could be because everything from being shy to angry or to sad, and yet people will assume certain things just because of the way one looks. And then one of the other things I kind of take away is, in addition to gender, we must also consider when we're having these kinds of really wonderful conversations about class and our structure of where our backgrounds are, because those also impact how we self-identify and our experiences. So my Asian American experience, I grew up in a very urban setting. I grew up in Rogers Park, East Rogers Park, where it was not the gentrified Rogers Park. It was a scary, it was a struggle at times, but those were my formative years, as opposed to, I had people who grew up in the same, who went to my church, but they were in the suburbs, right? And so there's that experience. Whether you grew up in a small place and you were the only Asian American or the Asian, adopted Asian, any of the above. I had students where they came from a farming background, rural area, and they were the only person. And the minute they saw me, I thought they were going to cry. And they were like, "You look like me." I said, "I certainly do." And so I kind of think about that a lot when I meet new people or the same people, or consider that, again, their experiences are not monolithic, and a lot of things shape who they are, and all of those things. So I hope that sort of helped our conversation, at least our three, because I do think we have very distinctive, similar, yet also different backgrounds.
Absolutely. I think that, thank you for sharing that, first of all, because I believe that one of these ideas is that with words, for example, one of the words that I really don't like is BIPOC. And I think that, I can't stand it. And one of the reasons why I'm raising that is because this idea that minority groups are a monolith, and that every minority group is kind of, if you just put all the Asian folks together, you put all the Black folks together, you put all these folks together, their experiences are the same, and they are not. They're quite complex. As you just said, the intersectionality of identity, is so critical in understanding how to make our spaces safe for everyone. We got to really understand who everyone is, right? In the first place, in terms of trying to create spaces for resources, right? So thank you for sharing that. My next question actually is for the deans. Our students, I know, are very concerned about their safety, particularly our AAPI students, and outside of the classroom, microaggressions in the classroom. Where do folks go? What do folks do when those things happen? Who do you appeal to? Where do you find support? Dean Berna and Dean Frewen, if you could tell us just a little bit more about what resources and options are available for our music students as well as our theater students. And then I'm going to circle back to our faculty members and asking about your experience as faculty members in the AAPI community and what that has been like as well.
So there is a reporting resource for students that is on the website. It is a link to a report that goes to the Dean of Students office. And when those reports are received, it's not required that they be of a certain level of seriousness or that certain things must have happened. The point of reporting is when students are made uncomfortable by things that happen in the classroom or outside the classroom, that they have a place to express themselves. And the Dean of Students office staff, along with anyone else they think is appropriate to bring into the situation, will then reach out and contact the students. Depending on what kind of incident or what kind of interaction is expressed. They may involve human resources as well. And again, there is an established report investigation protocol. And that investigation protocol does not mean that people are going to be fired or disciplined or anything like that. It's just that those conversations must happen. And I think the intent is always to clear up any understanding, but also to assert the student's right to be comfortable, to be safe, and to express themselves always. So there will be follow-up by someone when those things are reported. If the student wishes to remain anonymous, they may do so. And it is still possible for investigations to take place, for follow-up to take place. It is really, and this is a new feature that has been put in place this year by the Dean of Students Office to give students the option of, again, of expressing themselves. There are less formal ways as well for students to express themselves. They can speak to a faculty member, they can speak to a program head, they can speak to an advisor, they can speak to a staff member, and the level of responsibility lies with the person that they speak to take those concerns forward in a way, again, in a way that protects the student and that allows their concerns to be expressed and for some kind of resolution to take place. So I would encourage students, if they have anything that is making them uncomfortable, that they feel is just not right about an interaction that they've had with someone, a remark that has been made, a conversation, an exchange, something, whatever it might be, to avail themselves of that reporting structure so that we can start to take action. The commitment on the part of the university to take action to protect students' well-being and to make them feel safe and to start to work with faculty to make them more culturally sensitive and more culturally, I'm saying faculty, with anyone, right, to any interaction. The idea is that we all have a right to our safety and to our comfort and to have our identity respected. And that if that is not happening, that there are staff and faculty who will take action on behalf of those students.
Thank you. I know that was a very detailed response by way of the reporting system, so I really appreciate that. I would, if you could, Dean Frewen, I know that the Theater Conservatory deals with plays that have many themes about folks of other cultures and races, and I'm just going to go directly to the point, which I know is a concern for many of our students, about what are some of the steps that, you know, in theater as well as in music, of course, that are being taken around making sure that our seasons, both in music and in theater, are culturally responsible. You know, it's the best way I can put it, that really puts racial equity, justice, and honoring the histories and the traditions of all cultures at the forefront of what we put on stages at CCPA for our students, and making sure that our AAPI students, as well as all of our minority students, are treated fairly and justly in the process.
Yeah, a lot is currently under review and changing as we move forward on exactly that front. We are in the process of looking at the season for next year, which normally would be announced next week. And we informed the students, you know, a while back that is not happening in terms of what it will be, and just making a blanket announcement for a number of reasons, part of which is safety dependent. We don't know where we will be, what we'll be allowed to do. But we're in the process of nonetheless putting together a season. But we recently sent out to all of the students in the Theater Conservatory a simple 2-question survey to start, because some of our surveys have gotten us in trouble with too many questions. So we wanted to kind of cut right to the chase. And what we asked all students was, please let us know these 2 things. If there are particular titles that you would be interested in seeing the Theater Conservatory put a production on, or if there are genres, types of shows specific. And we got a nice response, not everybody obviously, but a nice response. And that has then been going, what has been influencing our conversations as we go through dealing with the selection and with our program heads as we're looking at what's done next year. So everything we've done in the past is just not being done the same way. It's not just any one person choosing it or conferring with a small group of people. Already we've got way more input on that. I suspect that as we get out of this year, out of the COVID situation and into next year, we'll even be able to take that to a way further extreme once we know what we can actually do. It's so interesting. I mean, obviously, just the nature of the 2 conservatories, particularly when it comes to our Asian students, is quite different. Linda has been dealing with some of these issues for way longer due to the international nature of musicians and what happens in the conservatories. What's been interesting for me in terms of dealing with particularly our Asian students is, and Adrian, we've talked at I don't know how many meetings this year about awareness and what we're aware of, what we feel guilty about not being aware of. One of the things that I have become frighteningly aware of late is, given the small numbers that we have had to deal with, it almost seemed like it was just assumed that everything was okay and they weren't the ones with the problems, almost flying under the radar, and that has proven obviously not to be the case. We had a troublesome production a couple years back that brought a number of those things, and that has resurfaced on more than one occasion and has made people very much aware of the canon and what might be a brilliant piece in its time for one reason or another, but has no business being done anymore. So these are all of the kinds of conversations we're having now, and we are drastically trying to increase the amount of input from all students, particularly all of our students of color. And lately, I've become so much more aware, as I said, of the handful of Asian students who just always seemed to be fine. And that's, again, looking through the eyes of privilege and not realizing where there were issues that were going unsaid. So it goes to what Linda was talking in terms of reporting and trying to find all those options. I just want to touch one bit on the reporting aspect of it too. In addition to what the students can do, one of the things we've been dealing with a lot is when something comes to our attention, whether or not we have an official report or a full report or direct contact or complaint from a student bringing something up, we have been taking great advantage of, through the Dean's Office again, of the Students of Concern Committee, because again, we can talk to them. It's not like a big report that's going to bring everybody's attention, but it is going to bring resources of the university to following up on what the issues and concerns may be in a very personal contact way that does not force any student to go forward with anything they do not wish to say, they do not wish to do, they do not want to have the spotlight on them as they deal with it. And that has been extremely helpful across the board this year in many issues, everything from academic to various racial issues.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because we have used that option as well in the Music Conservatory. And, as you say, it allows students to have conversations with someone with whom they feel comfortable, who has the authority and the ability to carry those students' concerns to another place if that is necessary. And so that also is something that we can do on behalf of students when we see that our students are in distress, or when we hear about incidents. I think that's really a key point here, is that we need to keep the lines of communication open about things when they happen, to deal with them openly and quickly as we can, but also that we need to take a personal approach, right? Everyone's identity is complex and it's composed of many different aspects, and the responsibility of those of us in leadership positions, and by that I mean all the faculty and all the staff, is that we need to learn as much as we can about individual students. And so that is the path that one of the paths that we're taking forward in order to try to address these issues as they're happening. In music, in terms of repertory, the students have just the different nature of the two disciplines allows students to perform as individuals. That is not a thing that happens in the theater conservatory. So the selection of the season and what that means for the students that will be assigned or selected to perform in various works is handled in a very different way. Our students take individual lessons and they perform as individuals. And so one of the things that we've been talking about in the music conservatory program heads meeting this year is either making requirements or suggestions or creating options for students to choose culturally diverse materials for their own individual performances. We have been talking all year long among the ensemble directors about making sure that our season is representative of the students who will be playing in those ensembles. So that is an ongoing project that we are as well working on and hope to be able to announce the ensemble season at some point in June. But the opening up of possibility to students' choice in terms of the selection of their own repertory, but also in terms of what students want to pursue in certain classes. In certain 300 and 400 level classes, we're employing more and more the flipped classroom, where students are suggesting topics that they want to pursue. Students are designing their own projects that are meaningful to them personally. And so that then becomes the content that the courses deal with. And just, finally, always problematizing the canon. The canon, there are many canons and they exist in some people's minds, but they are not truth and they are not immutable, and someone created them. So having more open discussions to really critique the canon, to talk about how certain things got to be accepted and certain things that meant the exclusion of certain other art is something that we can always talk about. And just having those conversations is helping us to move forward.
I know we're running low on time, so I'm gonna jump in. I apologize, just to make sure that one of the big things that I think is huge in the conversation about equity is making sure that we hear from the voices of the people who we are advocating for. And more specifically, this idea that in music, for example, though we do have those two differences you just discussed, on the opera stage, we see Asian folks characterized in ways a lot of times that is disrespectful. It does not honor, the cultural heritage and legacy, right? Though again, in theater, we have many shows and Broadway shows in that history, right? But what is so important, I think, in this entire process to make sure that our AAPI faculty members, students, that we hear from them, and so I wanted to close today by making sure that Yeeseon, as well as, and did I pronounce your name correctly? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Here's my rhyme. Your son, my son, Yeeseon.
Yeeseon. Yes.
It's an aspirated S. Like it's not like a hard S, but it's like you breathe through it. It's Yeeseon. But if you want to say the Western son, Yeeseon.
Gotcha.
But people like to put flares on it and things like that. So.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and I wanted to close today's conversation by hearing from you and Winston and MingHuan about your experiences as faculty members and what kind of guidance, advice, because these are roads that you have already walked, right? That some of our students are walking right now, in this moment of heightened aggression towards Asian folks in our country, as well as in our conservatory. And again, the reason I'm raising this is because I think it's important that we do not abdicate our responsibility or tell stories that are not true about how we got here, or how the canon got to what the canon is, or how these operas are told, or how Butterfly became Butterfly, or how, you know what I mean? That we tell the real ugly truth and own that so that we can move forward, And so I'm going to open that space to you to give that advice to our other Asian students who are experiencing these things right now, as I know you all are as well.
Well, thank you so much, Adrian, for these are such good questions, and I think that there's so many levels that the Asian students struggle. Starting from feeling uncomfortable with language and culture, to sometimes when the pandemic hit and being laughed at or made fun of when people start wearing masks. And to simple aggression that being told to stand away. These are all from my students. So this was last March when it happened. So these students went home. That was their last experience here. And so many of them are still out there in Asia. And I have to say, I have 3 students right now in China, and I have a couple from other schools, in Korea. To put it simply, is devastating for them. And what's so difficult is not just that experience, what happened here, it's when they went back right now, they're not allowed to be back here yet. There's no direct flight yet. And they're staying home with their parents, and where in some ways they have been Americanized, and so now they have to fit back into their old culture, and where they're being treated like kids. They're not grown up, but because they're here, they're already being independent. They live in a different country, spoke different language, and their classes, in some ways, in CCPA is doing a great job because we did adjust many of the classes to their schedule. But many of them, when they stop taking the English classes, and then when they start taking real courses, Dean Berna, that's something I wanted to talk with you about, is that how do we adjust their schedule so they don't have to, get up in the middle of the night, and because they aren't sure. I mean, right now we have one more thing on top of it, is the relationship politically between US and China. So, and it's so difficult, and right now, and these students are not sure whether they can come back and even finish their degree. But these are Chinese students, but all the other Asian students, we look very similar, so you can't really tell who is Chinese, who is Korean, who is from Hong Kong, who is from Taiwan. But within Asian students, we also have a lot of different political backgrounds, where there's a lot of tension going on here between China and Hong Kong, between China and Taiwan, and so it's very complex, but this, the silver lining about this whole thing is that finally we're starting to talk about it. I think that's the first step, and that's what Dean Berna was talking about. We have to keep communicating, and I think sometimes just having their voices heard, it's such a relief. It just feels like we can connect with somebody. Sometimes we just need our voices to be heard, and we feel like somebody else is taking over our burden just by a little bit. And it's to hold everything here, that's what caused the most stress, I would say. So having this platform to say, hey, we want to hear from you. But it happened way before pandemic too. That's what I said, but this is silver lining in some ways. We finally start talking about this. I mean, I had Asian students before the pandemic, Dean Berna, you probably remember Selena, my student, and she was outside of the building and walking with 2 more Asian students, and somebody came and punched her in the face, and she fell down, and right outside of our school. But back then we didn't identify this as race, right? They were just unfortunate incidents. But I'm sure all of us will feel that would come to our mind. Was it just a coincidence, or because I'm Asian? Just, you can't help it. It just always connected. So I think it's really, again, just to get to know the students personally, so not to treat all of them as now they're all Asian students, right? And to be able to not only, before we have a really hard time identifying ourselves, like whom do we belong? Do we belong to the white folks, the black folks, or where do we lie? Because we're such a quiet group, we're kind of trying to find our own identity too. So having this basically is giving green light to say, you know what, we can just be who we are. We don't have to try to belong to somebody, we can find our own identity. So I think just to keep talking to Adrian, you're saying to the, we have to tell the student the truth. And because some of them saying, well, Miss Ming, when I come back, how do I know that I will feel safe? Is this safe? And the truth is, it's much easier for me to say, well, you know what, it's going to be okay. Chances are it's going to be fine. But they're not convinced because they read the stories on newspaper. That's not what it says. I know news always blow up everything, right? But still, it exists, right? They're worried. And so outside of campus, there's nothing, we can't really do much, we don't have the control. But within campus, I think we can create an environment where, again, their voices matter, they feel heard, they feel seen. And I think it will mean so much. That's the first step, just to give them that platform so they feel important, they feel they can be who they are.
And if I may add to that, I mean, I think that's really, really, it kind of, for me, I know that that's a challenge to do, because I think our students, because they come with a lot of their vulnerabilities and fears, and their experiences are being so disparate that they don't know. I think they don't know who to trust, who can they talk to. And so I think one of the things that we can do, as for me, what I can do is to be as authentic and transparent as I can be, and tell them about me. So to say that I feel vulnerable. So when they ask, how do you feel? Yeah, and say, yeah, I'm scared to walk around outside too. I'm scared to go to school. When the events that happened in Georgia happened, it was traumatic. I mean, my entire family, we all got together, and from phones and Zooms, and we all shared, my mother to myself, my sister to myself, my brother and myself. I mean, these conversations are happening in the homes where you think, well, who's going to come and attack? Who is going to say that harsh word? Who is going to? And I think that's a real place of vulnerability, that if I can say that, no, you're not imagining it, I feel it too. It's okay to feel nervous and uncertain, because you're not the only one. I think that's an important part of being this larger community of our different experiences, that even though I'm a faculty member and you're a student, and yeah, and I speak the language more fluently than you, or what have you, and I'm Korean and you're not, or we all also feel there's some unified sense, and unified vulnerabilities, and so I think that raises an awareness that's bigger than ourselves. And I think that brings us some solidarity. And I always also encourage our students, maybe we are the only few Asian American students or Asian American faculty, but then to find larger communities, whether it is getting to know more Indigenous communities or Black and Brown communities who also have experienced marginalizations and prejudices and biases systemically, because I think there is that shared experience as being what America is, basically, because we're not a Japan, and we're not a Korea, and we're not a Taiwan. That even though we don't look like each other, Adrian, and you and I, probably we've had similar experiences, I might say. I would conjecture, maybe, perhaps, and say, well, what did those feel like and look like, And so I try to at least, be as truthful. When students asked, I had a couple students when Georgia happened, and they wrote an email to me and said, how are you doing? I was taken back. And I thought, that is so kind of you to ask. And I said, I'm good. And they were non-Asian, they were Caucasian. But still, I just thought our young people are very thoughtful. They're thinking, and they're caring, they're compassionate. They're empathetic even, and I find that to be encouraging. I also then want to educate people and say, look, I get scared, so I educate myself, and I want to encourage everyone to take bystander training because I've experienced and I've watched so much of that. Like you said, you're like wondering, was that a hate experience, or was that just like a serendipitous mugging, right? What do I do if that should happen again to me or to somebody else? Do I just freeze and fright like last time? What can I do? And so I'm signed up for, and I say this could be a way to empower. So find some strength in doing things like that. So I just say that I want to be there for them, and to say that they don't need to all just come to me, that I can be vulnerable and be with them too. And if that's of help. Sorry, Winston, you can go.
I think it's been mentioned several times today, but I feel like maybe it's worth bringing it up again. The silenced voices of many Asians. It's part of their upbringing. You know, we, even myself as Asian Canadian, or Asian American, raised in a household where we're told, don't really express your struggles, just eat it up, suck it in, don't even talk to your family about it, right? This is something that you just have to fight through, persevere. It's to be expected that people kind of push you down. So when it comes from a position of someone who loves you and is supporting you, but they have a style that is more kind of confrontational, or kind of put you in your place, you know, that's different than someone who's doing it, and where there are traces of discrimination involved. But I think sometimes it's out of habit, so myself included, and so many of our Asian students just eat everything up. And so that silence, to not assume that everything is okay, that very often they are the quiet ones and they have to cling together within a classroom because they don't feel comfortable opening up. Not that there's something that might be so outwardly racist towards them, but it's just a feeling of not fitting in, right? These little microaggressions here and there. And so we see that all the time. Of course, people in general will be around those that echo them and mirror them back. So of course it's easier to speak in your native tongue, or to also speak with someone whose English is not that good, so that you can both speak broken English together, things of that sort. Or you just simply are not part of that group, so we'll be in our own group together. And I think I was, in a sense, growing up in Toronto, in my community, which was about 40% Asian, we dealt with it from the level of what both Yeeseon and MingHuan are talking about. There's so many multiple layers. So the Canadian Chinese experience was so different from the Korean Canadian, and those that were fresh immigrants were treated terribly by the Canadian born Asians. Yeah. And there's so much subtlety involved with that. And nowadays, we won't get started talking about it today, but you know, labeling someone who is from Taiwan as just simply Chinese, or you know, with what's going on in Hong Kong, between Hong Kong and mainland China, those tensions are like the divide between Republicans and Democrats times 10. And that'll never be reconciled. And there is no ability to even talk through to the other side. And that exists, and two people can stand side by side, and we just don't perceive that. We don't realize that. It's as subtle as you don't know which party somebody belongs to in the U.S. So there's so much subtlety, and there's all the mental health aspects that are kind of embedded within some of those struggles, which have been for so long, and a kind of a frowning down upon seeking mental health counseling within the family, even within the society, that you know, that one would never dare admit to their parents that they have to see a psychologist or a counselor, or have some kind of guidance. And so I think so much of it is stored in there, and it manifests itself in different kinds of ways. The Asian American or Asian community goes through just as much mental health struggles and depression as everybody else, and it might not be as magnified They may not raise their voices the same way, but it's there. So there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hurt, and so I think really kind of understanding, you know, as everybody's been talking about, really trying to understand each individual and what their circumstances are like. And I'll just end on one last note. I felt, for the most part, growing up with, as I said, kind of like a whitewashed name, and that I belonged to a group of Asian Canadians who downplayed our Asianness, our Chineseness. And that's how we felt a certain pride within that. And I belonged to the side of these Asians who perhaps distance ourselves from those that were fresh immigrants.
Yeah, but you still end up marrying a Chinese girl.
Exactly. But then always kind of feeling like that divide. And then going to a place, I went to school at Indiana University, where largely had very positive experiences, but meeting somebody who shook my hand and said, "You're the first Oriental I've ever touched," you know, and suddenly just kind of feeling like, wait, I no longer belong to this group, right? Now I'm suddenly part of that group. Mm-hmm. And then going to China, looking the same as everybody else, being married to a Chinese wife, being Chinese myself, being afraid to open my mouth because once anybody heard that I couldn't speak the language or that I had an accent, suddenly I would feel discriminated against. So I didn't really belong there. I belong sometimes. I mean, I mostly belong wherever I am, you know, at home, here and there. But there are all these situations where I feel like I don't quite fit in. Mm-hmm. You know, even though I'm Canadian born. So
no place is 100%.
Yeah.
You feel like you fit in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That resonates a lot with me too, Winston. I don't fit here or there either. Yeah, I had exactly the same. I wonder if we know the same people. I had that exact same phrase spoken to me too. They said, "Oh, yeah, depending on the community, and you know, you're either not Asian enough, or you're too Asian, or any of the above, for sure." Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you for being a part of this panel, and for just, as you said, MingHuan, the opportunity to talk and to give voice, you know, to these things. And so thank each and every one of you for your time. Again, this is the first of what I hope to be many more conversations amongst our minority faculty members, as well as ways that we can specifically focus in on the many minority groups that we have at CCPA represented in our faculty and our students and our staff, to bring forth a greater level of understanding and a greater level of as I'm always talking about safety. I'm preaching about why it is a right of all of ours to feel safe wherever we are, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, wherever we are. These are such critical things. So I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you. And I will definitely be following up. And I hope that this was fruitful and productive first conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you.